Um, okay, so tonight I want to talk about our future. Um, Unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk about the future of our economy and our financial system. So for most of you, it's going to be a rough ride. So before I start that, I want to tell you about a few parties that I've been to recently. I don't get invited to many parties, but when I do, I've noticed that there's always a point in the night where the mood kind of changes, where the conversation kind of changes. The conversation gets a bit weird, it gets a bit philosophical, and this is the exact moment where I know that I am in the zone. I am in my element because there is one question that I love to ask people at this point in time, because depending on their answer, I can get a good grasp of who they are and what they really value in the world. And this is the question. What are mankind's greatest inventions? So a lot of people, it's a kind of a stupid question, right? Because there is no correct answer. There are a lot of great answers, but nothing that's absolutely correct. So a lot of people have like this default answer which they give me, and that's the wheel. And you know that type of person that they kind of haven't been thinking about this question for a long time. They'll just give me the wheel, and that's the default question. That's the default answer. But there are a lot of good answers as well, such as medicine, the printing press, space travel, combustion engine, the internet, language, mathematics, Google Maps. I mean, these are all really good inventions. But the one answer which I never get from people is money. And when I bring it up in conversation, people tend to scowl at me. I don't know really why. Maybe they think about money as being the root of all evil, or maybe it's just not a very good topic of conversation at a party. I don't know. But money runs deep with people. Money's like education, and it's like religion. It really runs deep with people. People really resonate with it. But I don't understand why I never get this answer. But money has been sort of the backbone of civilization for the past 7 millennia. It's been there at the forefront of our human development, and we need it. We need it to get the things we want, and we need it, and we don't really think about when we use it. We don't really think about the times in which we use it. We take it all for granted until things go wrong, and then we vilify it. So we vilify money itself, we vilify the systems that underpin it, and we vilify the people that are in charge and need to maintain it. And this was really reflected with respect to the Occupy movement in 2009, 2010, which started in New York and which went across the globe. I was in London, and I kind of saw this happening in Lombard Street. I was teaching in Hong Kong, and I saw it in London. And you know, when I go to London, I really want to go to Lombard Street, which is like the financial district, because I kind of love that type of thing. And I went on a flight to Hong Kong, and I was 16 hours in the flight, and then I landed in Hong Kong and went back to the financial district in Hong Kong, and the exact same thing was happening. And I was like, I was just in a flight for 16 hours, and the exact same thing is happening one side of the world and the other. Occupy really had a huge impact. And it's kind of this thing that Greg was talking about. There was a loss in trust. There was loss in trust with money, and there was loss in trust with the institutions that support it. And these kind of sort of cycles of crisis and revolt are kind of common. They happen a lot. They happen a lot more than I thought, and a lot more than we should probably allow them to happen. It just so happens that one of our greatest inventions, one of the things that we depend on the most, we actually don't really understand. So what can we do about it? Well, we're doing a lot about it. We're doing an awful lot. I mean, There are new technologies such as Bitcoin and peer-to-peer lending services that are being created in order to take the middleman out, to take banking out. And these are working to a limited success, but not really. So given that these things happen all the time, and given that new technologies just aren't really helping us, is there anything else we can do? So could it be that our history, our own history, is the key, is our greatest resource that we have to having a more stable and successful future in terms of the economy and finance? Because I feel that we all have a really vested interest in it. It's a decent question to ask, and as Edmund Burke, Irish statesman and philosopher, said, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and I feel that he could be correct. So apart from the subprime mortgage crisis, which we had in 2007, 2008, which left the legacy of millions of people in poverty, millions of people unemployed, and trillions upon trillions of pounds and dollars in debt, in government and private debt, apart from the subprime crisis, we seem to have this history of financial folly. Financial crises happen all the time. Every few years, we have another crisis. We have one exactly like the one that we had 5 years ago. It's something that just keeps repeating themselves, and this is just a few of them. This is just as many as I could fit into one slide. So, is there anything we can do about this? This is just a history of financial collapse. You can see that it happens very frequently. The peaks are sort of showing the number of banks that collapsed, and the red is in terms of GDP, so it's sort of weighted in terms of GDP. So you can have less banks collapsing around 2012, but it can still have a massive impact. So the same causes and the same characteristics of all financial crises are similar to each other. It just so happens that policymakers and regulators aren't really good at reading history. So let's take two financial crises that's happened in history. And these are literally the most random ones I could pick. One is 1857 and the other is 2007. So let's take these random crises and compare them to see if they are the same, to see if they have the same characteristics and the same cause. And 1857, which was 150 plus years ago, people were well versed in crises. Crises happened all the time. 1825, which was arguably the biggest crisis that has ever happened, in the UK at least, was called the Latin America crisis. This is when a lot of investors invested in wars in Latin America and invested in fictional Latin American countries. So there's a great story about this guy, this Scottish guy. He's literally called Gregor MacGregor. He joined the Scottish Army and he went to fight in Venezuela in Latin America. And when he did, he decided that he'd had enough of this war, and he defected. And he defected to Honduras, and he didn't have any job, he didn't have any money, he had nothing to his name. So he decided that, I'll make up my own country. So he decided to make up his own country and put himself as a ruler, and then sell UK citizens who were unsuspecting, who legitimately thought that his country was a real country. He sold them government bonds, and he sold them investments and land ownership rights, so that when the people came over from the UK to visit their new country, it didn't exist, and Gregor MacGregor had fled back to Venezuela, and he literally caused one of the biggest crises in history. In 1837, 10 years after, there was a cotton crisis, and in 1847 we had the railroad crisis. So railways were the dot-coms of their day. Nobody knew what a railway was like, how it worked. Nobody really knew the returns on it. This was a really weird invention, and stocks plummeted, and we reached a crisis. So by 1857, people were well versed in this. The UK and the US had been having a crisis per decade rule. So by 1857, when the railroad stocks crashed again, everybody thought that this was more of the same thing. Everybody thought that this was just like 1847, 1837. People didn't really care about it. until bankers started running their own banks. Bankers literally made their own banks fail. So we had a contagion, and 1857 was the first ever global contagion. So what started with bank runs in Cleveland went to New Orleans, went to New York, went to Liverpool, which was a big exporter to the US, and then Glasgow, London, Paris, all the way through Europe to Vienna. So the problems of a hyper-connected world, which we talk about today, were really relevant in 1857, 150 years ago. So let's look at the characteristics of this crisis. First, we had a bank run with banks that had invested in railway stocks. And we'd had a period of low interest rates, which meant that there was more lending and more debt. We had financial innovation. New banks had been created in order to supply loans to people. We had new technologies, which were railways, and we had insufficient regulation. So these are the characteristics of 1857. And if we go to 2007, the characteristics are exactly the same. We had a bank run, which was Northern Rock, in 2007. We had a period of low interest rates in 2005, which meant that people were buying mortgages, and people were incentivized to buy mortgage and take on debt because credit or money was cheap. We had financial innovation. I don't know if anybody's heard of these things, but asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps. We had all these new things that allowed banks to lend money out to people. So people took on more debt. We had new technologies, which is the dot-com bubble in 2001. And we had insufficient regulation. So the exact same characteristics you can see in 2007, although the intricacies are a bit different. So the characteristics are the same, but what about the cause? So I did my PhD looking at financial crises, and there was one cause. I looked through every single financial crisis I could possibly look at, and there was one cause one cause of each crisis, one cause that was just persistent through time, and it's just that banks have no incentive to be prudent with your money. I mean, you give it to a bank, you deposit money to a bank, and the owners of the bank have no incentive to see where the money is going. And so it goes under more risky ventures. So John Turner, who's a professor at Queen's, wrote a book this year called Banking in Crisis. And he hit the nail on the head. Banks are prone to instability whenever shareholders do not face much risk because their liability is limited and their paid-up capital is low relative to deposits. When this is so, management will engage in risk shifting. They will lend excessively. They will gamble in riskier ventures. This is exactly what we've seen for the past 250 years. And there are solutions. In fact, there's one single solution that could be employed in order to stop this from happening again. So this is the idea. Give bankers more incentive to care. It's literally that simple. And how do we do that? So we do that by introducing a rule that means that if a bank does fail, the bank itself pays its depositors every single penny that they've put into the bank. Banks today don't do that. They just get bailed out. Or they just fail, and depositors lose their money or get it reimbursed by the government. Before 1792, or 1720, which was the first sort of crisis, banks were structured like this. They had what we call unlimited liability, which means that if a bank fails, its owners become bankrupt. And we had no crises. None. Not one. So there's a very easy solution to implement. And I guess the thing that I'm going to conclude on is just that history is a really important resource. And we keep thinking that new technology is going to help us when we've actually gone through the same things again and again and again. And that can help us. Okay. Thanks.